Hi friends, welcome to Beautifully Bookish Bethany, where I have new videos every week about books and the geeky mom lifestyle. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about my top 10 favorite romance authors. The last few years I've been on this journey into the romance genre, discovering what I like, what I don't like. It is an ongoing journey, but I thought it would be fun to do a video talking about my 10 favorite romance authors as of right now. This definitely could change in the future, and maybe it would be interesting to redo this video again at some point and kind of track how things change over time. I can tell you there's definitely a couple of authors who are strong contenders for joining this list, but I did put a few restrictions on how I curated this. For this video, I'm only including adult romance authors, so this does not include any YA. And secondly, to be able to make it onto this list, I had to have read multiple books by an author. So there are some cases where maybe I've read one book that I really loved, or I've read one that I really loved and one that was pretty good. We're not quite favorite status yet. I think a good example of this is Kennedy Ryan. Grip is one of my favorite books that I've read this year, but I don't feel like I've read enough of her work to say that she's one of my favorite romance authors at this point. With that said, let's go ahead and dive in. These are in no particular order, and I have a mix of some historical authors, some contemporary authors, some paranormal authors, a little bit of everything. One other caveat to this is definitely romance on the steamier side of things. If you are looking for romance that doesn't have explicit sex scenes, I think there's maybe a couple of authors I could recommend from this list, but for the most part, this is going to be on the steamier side, just as a note. All right, with that said, let's go ahead and get into the list of my top 10 favorite romance authors as of 2020. First up is an author who is a go-to recommendation if somebody is looking for fun historical romance, and that of course is Tessa Dare. Tessa Dare is the queen of lighthearted, funny historical romance with great characters and more feminist sensibilities. I would pretty much recommend her to anybody who is looking to get into historical romance, and The Duchess Deal I think is a great place to start with her. This is one of my favorite books from her, a marriage of convenience with a grumpy, literally damaged hero and a spunky heroine, and it's just great. It's fun and funny and sexy, and I'm just a fan. So Tessa Dare, one of my favorite historical romance authors, especially for the lighter side of things. I know her books are always going to put a smile on my face. Another historical romance author who is quickly becoming a favorite is Courtney Milan. I have loved everything that I've read from Courtney Milan so far. I have to admit, I've not read a lot of her backlist. I want to read more. I've read this, and I've read I think like 3 of her historical novellas, and all of them have just been top-notch. Her writing quality is really good. Her books are super smart. They address bigger thematic issues. They're sex positive and focus on consent, and I just really like them. Her stuff works for me, and I'm excited to continue reading more from her. The Duchess War was my first introduction to Courtney Milan, and this was actually gifted to me from Mara over at Books Like Whoa, and this was a great pick. I do really enjoy her work, and I want to read more from her. Okay, I'm just gonna go ahead and finish out the strictly historical romance authors with the queen, Beverly Jenkins. Miss Bev is such an incredible author. She does write some contemporaries as well, although I have not read any of them, but I've read several of her historicals and they are so good. Tempest is my personal favorite. It is one of my favorite romances I've ever read and one of my favorite books that I've read in 2020. One thing that I actually love about her books is, despite the fact that her covers all tend to be pretty sexy, they are very heavy on history. Beverly Jenkins does a ton of research into history that is often not covered in schools or talked about. History of people of color, of Black people in the Americas, in the Caribbean. She writes these incredible stories with great characters and great romance that are also going to teach you something. You're going to come out of her books learning something about whatever historical time period she's writing about. Tempest is probably my favorite of the books I've read from her because I find it to be the most romantic. I love the characters so much, the hero and the heroine. I love their romance. This is a mail order bride story with a spunky heroine who accidentally ends up shooting the hero before she meets him for the first time because of reasons, and that's how the book opens, and it goes from there. He's this quiet, introverted doctor who's a widower and has a little girl that he's raising, and I just loved this book so much. It was funny and romantic, and I just thought it was really, really great. So if you haven't picked up Beverly Jenkins yet, do yourself a favor and read her books because they're awesome. Next, I will talk about probably my favorite romance author, and just in general, one of my all-time favorite authors. She is like a queen who can do no wrong and can basically write anything. And that, of course, is Alyssa Cole. So if you want contemporary romance, her Reluctant Royals series is incredible. I've read all of them, and I'm super excited for her new spin-off series. Book 1 is coming out in December. They are fun and smart and sexy and have great characters, diverse representation, smart themes. I love her books a whole lot. But if you want historicals, she can do that too. An Extraordinary Union is the first book in a series that is set during the Civil War. They're just like so smart and well researched and well done. Let It Shine is one of her historical romance novellas. This one is set during the Civil Rights era, but she has novellas set in a bunch of other historical time periods, all centering Black characters, and her books are all really, really great. If you want speculative romance, The AI Who Loved Me is one of her most recent. It's an Audible original that you can also now get as an ebook for Kindle, and it's fantastic. I haven't read them yet, but she also has an earlier series that is kind of a thriller sci-fi romance series, I want to say. I've not read those ones. Then she has a book that just came out that I've not yet read, but I'm super excited to, that is a actual thriller. It's like a gentrification thriller. So she can basically write anything, and all her books are phenomenal. So I would say Alyssa Cole is easily one of my favorite authors, period, and certainly a favorite romance author. Okay, moving on, let's talk more about contemporary romance. And the next author that I want to recommend, she does write romance, but most of the books that I've read from her probably qualify more as women's fiction, where they have romantic elements, but the romance isn't necessarily the central part of the story. But I just love her books so much, I still wanted to put her on this list, because I think even if you're not usually a big women's fiction reader, if you like good characters, like strong characterization, there's nobody better. And that is Sarah Morgan. So this is The Christmas Sisters. It's one of her books. She has a Christmas book that comes out every year. She has written genre romance as well. I haven't read so much of that, but I love the characters she writes. They're so fleshed out and believable and relatable. She writes such an incredible family dynamics. I just love her books, and this one is a good one. It's about three sisters who were adopted, and now they are adults. They've kind of drifted away from each other, and they're supposed to be going to stay with their adoptive mom in the Scottish Highlands for the holidays, and a lot of things come to a head. They've got romantic elements to them. It's also got sisterhood and life issues, and I just love her books so much. So even though most of the ones I've read are not exactly genre romance, I still wanted to put her on this list because I just think more people should be reading and talking about them. Next is another author who I so far have really loved. I've read 2 books from her, and those are the only 2 books that are out. I have an arc of her 3rd book, which I'm hoping to get to in the next like month and a half or so, and it's coming out soon. But that is Alyssa K. Adams. She is writing the Bromance Book Club series, and I love these. I think they're so great and fun and funny, and they kind of have a meta element to them as well, because they're romance novels about romance, and then each of them is kind of supposed to be part of a different genre of romance. I think these are really great. The basic setup for these is that there's a group of guys who secretly have the Bromance Book Club, where they read romance novels and study them as guides to having better relationships with the women in their lives. And I just really have enjoyed both of the books from her. I'm excited to see what else we get from her in the future, and at least at this point I would put her on my list of romance faves. The next author is another near the top of my list of favorites. I've read a bunch of different things from her and have liked them all. Her writing always works for me, even if there might be like small things that would bring it down to like 4 stars instead of 5 stars. I just consistently love her characters, love the diversity that she includes in all of her books, and I just think she's a fantastic author, and I'm happy to see her becoming more popular. That is Talia Hibbert. This is Take a Hint, Dani Brown. I think one of the best romances that has come out this year. It is just fantastic, and her backlist is really, really good too. So this series is her first traditionally published series, but she actually has quite a number of books that she published as an indie author prior to this, and they're also really, really great. So I could gush about Talia Hibbert's books, and I want to continue reading more of them. I've read several books and novellas from her and have not disliked any of them. So if that tells you anything, she always focuses on consent. She has great heroes who aren't controlling. She has strong heroines. She has diversity at a level that I don't really see most other people writing at. She has autistic characters, characters who deal with chronic pain, bisexual characters, like our heroine in here is bisexual. There's just a lot, and I love her a whole lot. So if you haven't read Talia Hibbert, I would for sure recommend her. Okay, the last three authors I want to talk about write a little bit more in the paranormal space. One of them is kind of a crossover between historical fiction and paranormal. It's like a gothic historical vibe to her books. I just love the books that she's released so far, and I will definitely continue reading her books. And this is the one other author on this list where if you don't like explicit sex scenes, this is somebody that you could try other than Sarah Morgan. And that is Hester Fox. This is her debut novel, The Witch of Willow Hall, and I have also read her second book. Her third book is on my TBR. She writes these kind of spooky, light romances, and sometimes it's supernatural, sometimes you think it could be supernatural, but it's not. They all have this kind of gothic vibe to them. They're set in like Maine and Massachusetts in the 1800s, so the East Coast region of the United States during that time period. And I just think her books are great. If you want something that's going to be spooky without necessarily being outright scary, that also has a strong romantic plot to it, she is a great author to check out. Next author on this list, I'm putting her on here because I consistently love the plots of her books, even if the actual romances are hit and miss for me. And partly because I know that I don't like certain types of romances, especially with alpha males and heroines who aren't also kind of more alpha. It's just not my cup of tea. But that said, her storytelling and world building and characterization are just so, so good. I had to talk about Nalini Singh. This is Slave to Sensation. It's the first book in the Psy Changeling series that is technically, I would actually call this like a sci-fi romance, but people talk about it as paranormal because it has shifters, but there's like scientific reasons for the shifters. So this is set in kind of a future Earth where humanity has diverged, and some of them have become the Psy, who have these psychic abilities, and some of them have become shifters who are more in touch with their animal selves. And the key here is that the Psy have trained emotion out of themselves. They're not supposed to feel anything. And so of course in book one you have a romance between a Psy who's supposed to be cold and not feel any passion, and a shifter who is all about animal passion. And they're just really, really fun. These have a mystery element to them, and the overarching plot that goes across books is really strong and really good. The world building is incredible. And you know, the romances are a little bit of a mixed bag. I did really like this one. Probably my favorite so far of the ones that I've read is Caressed by Ice. I am behind. These came out a long time ago and I'm like slowly catching up. But in general, I do really like what she's doing and would recommend checking her out. So I'm going to put Nalini Singh on my list of favorites this year. And the final author that I want to talk about is the only one that I started reading pre-BookTube. So I have been reading her books long before I started watching BookTube, before I really started getting into romance, but I still think they're fantastic, especially if you're looking for more of a historical paranormal vibe, and that is Gail Carriger. I love her writing. She has a very distinct flavor and style that doesn't work for everybody, but if you like her, she's fantastic. This is my favorite series from her that I've read. Soulless is the first in her Parasol Protectorate series. This is like the fancy special edition illustrated version of it. These books are great, and Alexia Terabati, who is the heroine in the series, is one of my favorite heroines. She's just great and funny, and I love the interaction between her and our hero. These are wonderful. They are set in an alternate Victorian London. They have some steampunk vibes to them. There's werewolves, there's vampires, there's ghosts, there's mysteries that go through the plot, there's spin-off series. I really, really enjoy these. They're very fun, very tongue-in-cheek, and I think especially if you enjoy Victorian literature, which I do, if you like Victorian classics, you will probably enjoy the sense of humor that she has and the writing style that kind of like plays off of that, but with a little bit of a modern twist to it. So Gail Carriger is for sure a favorite. So there you have it for 2020, my 10 favorite romance authors. I'm curious to see how this list might evolve in future years, because there are for sure authors that I'm reading from that could eventually make it on this list. Kennedy Ryan is a perfect example. Talk to me in the comments down below. Let me know any of your thoughts or feelings on any of the books that I talked about or authors that I talked about today. And for your question of the day, it's the obvious one. Tell me, who are some of your favorite romance authors? Are they ones that I mentioned here? Are there other authors that you really love? Let me know in the comments down below. If you guys like this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you want to see more. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.